Yeah,
All
wow.
right. All
Interesting.
right. Ready to go?
Yeah,
Yep.
let's do it. Rock and roll.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. It's Tuesday night. It's time for Tuesday Night Live. Welcome. It's Brett Axelrod and Rick Markson, along with an amazing guest who probably needs no introduction, but I'll do it anyway. David Fletcher from CLA, the man. We were just sort of reminiscing back that we probably haven't seen each other in a couple of years just because of various circumstances of being off the road. But I mean, there was not a weekend that we weren't in a different city, maybe taking different airplanes, but ending up at the same place. Number one, amazing to see you, and thank you for catching up with us. Let's just jump in. Just tell us what you're doing. Like, just vomit it out. Let me hear what's going on.
Well, let's see. I think the three of us in our green room sort of lead into this, decided we would conspire and take over the world. So I guess we can go with that.
Go easy. Go easy.
How many times have we said that?
Oh, let's see. Probably a few years. Yeah, about as many as we should have. And still, it's a work in progress, though. We'll say we're not quite there yet. Doing the love affair that I have with chiropractic, which is what brings us three together. Running a pretty dynamic worldview with chiropractic with CLA. It's fascinating because, and we can probably get into this a little later, but it's that perpetual and endless. Optimism. We get a chance at CLA to work with some really cool clients, and if you take a look at the I would say the cohorts that we're able to really see jumping into the message that we're talking about, it's really young and dynamic and successful chiros, and so I'm hopeful.
Well, Dave, I have to say, listen, I've admired you for so many years because to me, you were one of the few people on the cutting edge of both marrying the philosophy and science. I know, Pat Tempo kind of started CLA years and years ago, and the technology and everything else, and the subluxation station, which I thought was brilliant. But kind of like you were like the BJ Palmer of CLA, you were kind of like the developer. You kind of took it and ran with it and brought it to a whole nother level. So what are some of the new and exciting technological advances that you've made so far to really help our profession kind of get ahead? And I don't want to say prove what we do, and we're always talking about the research and everything else, but I think it's come a long way in a short amount of time, and you have a lot to do with that.
I think that the timing was right and ripe, and when you have such great friends, and really it was the friendship of myself and Christopher that led me to Larry, and as a result of that, our two communities have had such a vivid relationship for so many years. But I think that right at about that time where I was taking over in the CLA, and I really had a very strong academic, philosophical, and chiropractic background, is that the whole understanding of something called neuroplasticity came to light. And so as much as there was always this great understanding of how chiropractic was really not about the spine, but about the spinal function with the nervous system, all of a sudden the rest of the world in chiropractic really woke up to the idea that everything we talked about, which was the triune of life as it was expressed, could be described in a very, very logical and defensible way, which is neuroplasticity. And what the coolest part about the neuroplasticity message was that it was always about adaptability. It was about, can you just raise up the ability of that beautiful person in front of you to be more responsive to their environment, yes, to the moment, but can they just keep adapting so that they can be healing and healthy and express their potential? And the coolest part about that, which is where really the coaching and the development of all the strategies that you and Rick talk about especially, it was this idea that if you just got the message to them and they didn't fight it, and you put them on a responsible care plan that was based upon the objective data, which is all about time and repetition making a difference, you had a patient for a lifetime. And so, we really have endeavored to build the essence of chiropractic, the ideas of the science behind this neuroplastic modeling through adaptation, and bring it to the chiropractor so that they have this confidence and the certainty. So years ago, we developed the subluxation station, which was sort of the gold standard for anything that wasn't X-ray as far as examinations went. That doesn't mean you don't use X-ray, for goodness sakes. You, of course, have the structural responsibility. But it was really about looking behind the great green curtain of Oz and sort of going, what is going on in the nervous system? And so the latest iterations were that we really shifted from being that sort of console version to wireless a number of years ago. But like everything else in technology, you get a chance to really buff up signal transmissions and the boring shit that really, people aren't really necessarily engineering wise. But then in the latest iteration, which we spent the last couple of years developing, we now have it so that it's an iPad interface. And so you now are able to scan off an iPad. You now are able to develop, I think we have just under 20 reports that come out of it now. You can share it, you can share your reports with your patients, with anybody, just by any other way, like you can send it in a message or a messenger or an email or otherwise. So we've really evolved this relationship with the capacity of technology to interface with the chiropractic message. And it's pretty much the hottest thing that's going on right now, which is very cool.
I'm very curious about your opinion about this. Obviously, there's no wrong or right. There's a couple of different camps going on right now about the whole immune system. Can chiropractic really affect the immune system? And anecdotally, obviously, we've always said yes. At Chiro Destiny, we teach structure plus function, obviously equals outcome and corrective care and all that.
Absolutely.
We definitely recommend the subluxation station. We use it in our offices because that's measuring function as much as we can. As you said, taking x-rays, doing foot leveler scans or foot scans, measure structural changes. When you hear about some of the chiropractic boards or states or colleges talk about, well, there's no real evidence that chiropractic affects immune function, or as you mentioned, adaptability and plasticity, how do you answer that? What recommendations do you tell as to our profession based on the technology that you've seen?
Well, there's two answers, which of course is always the way chiropractic is. But the two answers, no, unreservedly, chiropractic influences through the central nervous system, the immune system, unreservedly. The saddest part about it is, and I sit now as a board member with the ASRF, which is the Australian Spinal Research Foundation, which is actually the largest spinal research, subluxation center, and we collaborate tremendously with all aspects of it. And so one of the things that we have to realize is that chiropractic influences through releasing nauseous tension from the nervous system and engaging and stimulating the positivity of the balance and the function of the nervous system, a greater regulatory capacity, which shows up within the immune responsiveness. And there were some anecdotal studies that were done with CD4 counts, and there was the incomplete relationship between tying towards serum thiols and everything else that was going on. But where there was smoke, there was fire. And I don't think that anybody who works in an evidence-informed basis doubts the fact that there is a relationship between functionality within the immune system. But here's the other story, is that there's no evidence-based, clinically reviewed papers that say exactly that. And so I spoke about the ASRF because one of the things that we did was that we put a call to paper, which was to say, listen, we need to take it to the next level, which, it brings out the research strategists that come into it. Here's the thing. We don't have to draw blood to try and check and see neutrophil counts and to try and check and see what's going on in the blood profiles of people. We have a technology which is proven, not we, but I'm saying the world has a technology that's proven that says that if you have a neural imbalance that's associated more with sympathetic dominance and parasympathetic insufficiency, that you definitely have two things that happen. And this is without conjecture or otherwise. You absolutely have a pro-inflammatory responsiveness, meaning that you have a hair-triggered inflammation developed model. And the second is that you have an impaired IgG, IgE responsiveness. In other words, that you do not get, when you have sympathetic dominant responses, you do not get the comeback to the neutral, which means that, and everybody has to hear this, is that it isn't because you have a sympathetic dominant response, is that you have a parasympathetic insufficient response. And this is hugely important for everybody to realize, because this is where the influence of chiropractic is misunderstood unless you're sort of in the echelon of where we get a chance to play. And that is that the genius of the chiropractic adjustment has always been to the specific. It hasn't been to identifying the vertebral fixations and the spinal fixations. It's been to determine the relationship between neural dysfunction, especially parasympathetic low tone. And so why do you think that the greatest techniques of all time have focused on upper cervical to affect vagal tone and sacral adjusting to engage the sacral complex again? And so when we start to recognize that we have probably the greatest hidden, unfortunately, tool to re-engage neural capacities, neural sufficiencies, and balance, I don't know, we just got to put some research behind it. But here's the problem, and I live in this world too much, is that even if we did the best gosh darn thing we could ever do, which is to spend the money and spend the time getting it, right, there is such negativity in the world these days that I'm not sure our message would get out there.
Right.
Right. And, it's at the saddest reality that, we're all sort of nodding our head in realization that our best effort is still grassroots. It's still patient by patient. And, one of the things I want to dovetail into for a second, because we'll go back to technology, because we certainly want to hear what's new and what's exciting, is when Chiro Destiny got together. This is now our 11th year. And we started with you in a small hotel in Chicago, just having a ball. We had whatever it was, 60, 70 people. We're just having a blast. And we really were talking about the ability to communicate nerve interference, communicate subluxation through the scans, through our skill set of helping people build rapport, keep rapport, meet them where they are, take them down a path. Have you seen over these last few years, because of technology, because of social media, because of some of the ways that people learn now, have you changed the way you educate your clients and the CLN members to communicate subluxation?
Oh, absolutely. I used to take them on first off, in the earliest days when Chris Kent was putting together the 3D model of the subluxation, he talked about dyskinesia, dysautonomia, and dyskinesis. And dysautonomia was really more localized. It was on old school. It was about using thermographic scanning to look at the neural bundles associated directly with the spine. And in about 2006, 2007, heart rate variability started to come into the mix. And this is that technology that I said is going to change the world, because that vagal tone that I'm talking about, earlier, is really associated with that. So in that transitional time, people have embraced a very, very, very useful, easy to apply and applicable, reporting model, which is heart rate variability. Now, the challenge that we have is that, and this is all spectrums of chiropractic, is that there's a tendency to try and pathologize everything. To try and make it symptom-based, or to agree with the patient who wants to have their symptom-based thing fixed. And so you have to be very, very strong. You have to be very strongly, trained and taught. And so, Rick, you asked the question, have we changed our methodology of that? Well, we always were subluxation centered, but we realize now that we have to really focus on slaying the pathology model within the decision tree of the chiropractors. Even the spinal pathology model is a secondary to the neural functional model. So neural functional means that we get a chance to really, and I always love this. This was a Stephen Covey from, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He said, you always begin with the end in mind. And, when you begin with the end in mind, you don't have to do a bait and switch. You don't have to go down some wicked path that talks about their spinal pain and, oh, by the way, you're going to feel better at the end of it. If you just get it right up front, and this is what we sort of train to our patients now, it's that they want to have a connection and emotion with a healing community. That's what people come in wanting. And so they, as much as they have their own, look, if they wanted to have their symptoms managed, they know what to do about symptom management. They're tired of that stuff. They want to be part of something which is social media based and otherwise, that talk about the bigness of life, just like we always did. Even if it isn't the story they want to hear immediately, they want to have something that ties them into a bigger picture. And as a result of that, when you get a chance to step in front of them and this is begin with the end in mind, and go, and this is what I used to do in my practice, and I think it's now what I see happening in this really dynamic younger group that's coming up, is that they listen with a big ear and they talk to the patient about what matters to them, and then they sort of reframe the conversation to say, I'm surprised. You were built to recover on your own. Why do you think things went off the rails? And it's sort of this communication that leads them down the path to say, a healthy, functioning, well-balanced and finely tuned nervous system is capable of helping you adapt at any time and at any place to what you need to handle. So why don't we begin by looking at your nervous system and find a way to tie that together with the symptoms you bring? And I find that when we get a chance to really talk to our clients, that they don't feel like they're trying to use it as a marketing tool or use it as some type of, differentiator only in the thing, but to really bring out their clinical excellence, which is really what they do best. Like our clients, your clients, and all the people that really care about chiropractic, they can smell, taste, feel, touch a subluxation like no one else. And if they can then show that to the client and let them know that they were always on that path that was about finding the subluxation that's interfering in their life expression, the people we want to work with get that. And I know it's grassroots, but let me tell you, right now, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right, because I just checked, and we're right now selling into 36 different countries actively. So we're we've got a pretty good world view as to what's going on with the here and there's. I mean, we've got a couple in Kenya, so it's not like we're dominating the Eastern African world. But the realities is that we're finding that the people that embrace just what I'm talking about here, which is this idea that the adjustments stimulate a neurofunctional adaptive response that obviously triggers immunity, inflammatory responses, all the things that are clinically relevant, are flourishing these days. Let me put it this way. They're operating at 80% of what they should, which is flourishing these days.
Right. Rick and I, as we coach hundreds and hundreds of chiropractors over the years, and especially our members, and some of our members are some of the most successful in the country without a doubt, because this is the model that they do follow. Yeah. When we have chiropractors that call us up and say, I need help, I'm struggling, Rick, you would probably agree with us that there's a theme that we typically see. They are probably more symptomatic based.
Yep.
Very, very poor communicators. And then some of them try to be more evidence based, which I'm not. To me, like the pendulum kind of swang all the way to one, and now it's starting to come back a little to what to your point. And I think if there is a way to measure or to show patients exactly where they were at any moment in time, so to speak, in terms of their overall health, their overall tone, their heart rate variability, their ability to adapt to their environment, internally, externally. You talked about parasympathetic insufficiency. If there's a way to somewhat measure that and show a patient that just because you're out of pain, right, this is not fully corrected. We still have a ways to go. Your body can still be functioning at a higher level, blah, 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 blah. If there is a way that we could communicate that to the practitioner in such a way that they can turn around and communicate that more effectively to their patients, potential patients, think about where this profession could go. I think it's moving in that direction because of people like you and hopefully people like us. So what would you say to the struggling chiropractors out there who are looking for, that life preserver, or they're stuck, or just want to move forward and get to another level? What advice would you give them based on
and I think this would come very clearly through how you engage your client base. Is the very first thing I would do is I'd have them seriously look in the mirror and talk to themselves to say, you made a great decision to be a chiropractor. Don't blame chiropractic for where you're at. Let's get you centered on it. Now, number one, let's build your certainty. And if there's one thing that they can be certain, they may not have the skill sets of certainty. Like, I get that, whether it's the skills of adjusting, the skills of analysis. But the one thing that they can be certain of is, number one, they chose the right profession. And number two, that they have the opportunity in a very short order of time to tie together a simple belief system that takes them away from being symptom-based. It's a cluttered marketplace to try and manage symptoms when you're whacking spines, man. I'm telling you that you're never going to win that game. And so if you simply, and this is that classic 2-degree, shift, if you could just shift 2 degrees for the struggling person and open up to move. And we used to have that giant poster. Remember Dave Major had that poster that was feeling versus function. If they could just move their mindset from feeling versus function and open up a conversation with them and said, when you feel this way, your body is telling you it's not functioning properly. Let me look and see what's changing. That's all they have to say. And then when they say, let me look and see what's changing, don't fall into the trap and say, how does that feel? Is that they have to go back and wrap their head around, how is that functioning?
Right.
And
but as you know, it's the docs either feel like that's not what they were taught in school.
Yeah, I know.
Right. So they really feel like it's a leap to leave their school teachings behind them and jump off the diving board off the scary cliff, or the people, which is our sort of specialty, have such fear because of the uncertainty that they want to be liked. They are afraid they're not going to be able to pay their rent, and all the fear just starts to pile on. Yep. And they just stick here because it's comfortable and it's safe, but it never gets you to the problem.
And then they tell the patient what they want to hear, not necessarily what they
desire to be liked, fear of rejection, fear of all the stuff you've learned. You sat in Larry's classes the same next to us.
I did. I learned so much from your father. And one of the things that they need to take just a little bit of a leap of faith is that you can measure and you can communicate function, just in fact easier because it's objective. When you're dealing in the feeling zone with everybody, you're at their mercy because it's subjective. And the one thing that is truly objective is the signaling within the nervous system. And so that's one of the reasons that the ability to blend together really cool, neuromuscular signals with neurofunctional signals with that big global signal pattern, which is heart rate variability, which looks at this. I absolutely know that simple little toe in the water test, which moves them from feeling to function, is so freaking easy. All they have to do is literally shut up, when it comes down to it, and don't make it up. And we actually created what's called the core score. And so we took the data and we spend gazillions of hours with really smart people and too much money. And we build all these tools, which is the core score takes the aggregated data from heart rate variability, from EMG and from thermography, and ties it together and creates a single score, which is called a neural efficiency index. And it's a beautiful indices because it shows you whether they're getting more efficient with their nervous system function. And look, one of the things that happens is that when you start to, it's like exercising at a gym or on a Peloton or whatever else, is that when you start working harder towards getting healthier, you have to change patterns in your body. You have to change rhythms and you have to work harder and the muscles work harder and you spend more energy. And the joy of these neurofunctional signals is it picks all of that up. So it shows you that you're working harder towards a goal. And if you, and this is simple care planning, that you sit down and say, forget about the number of visits. I mean, that's the secondary thing. Just sit down and say, listen, I need 3 examinations to tell me exactly where we're going. I need an initial one to tell me where you're at. I need one to see that you're progressing. And I need one to help me understand if you're building the proper trends within your nervous system. So we set it up, that we're going to get you, examined and cared for every 12 sessions. It's going to take us anywhere from 12 to 18 months to get where we want to go. But why don't we just focus on those next 8 to 12 weeks and see where you're at? I mean, literally, that's care planning for somebody who's terrified, because they can stand behind the objective data and do it.
Well, I want to dovetail, and I remember back when, it's actually 20 years ago. I don't know if you remember, but I got my first substation.
Oh, totally.
30th birthday present. Patrick gave me a substation on stage. Little side back deal between Larry and Patrick. It cost me a lot of weekends on the road helping you guys at Total Solutions, but it was worth it. But you and I had asked for some personal help in the years that I was really working on growing my communication skill and working on the efficiency of high volume practice. only because we coach this and our clients ask us. So I'm going to have them hear it right from the source.
Sure.
Because they want efficiency. So how often should they scan? Should they scan every 12? Do you scan every 12? When you were running, you were running 500, 600, 700 a week. You're in even more, right? Yep. So what do you recommend as the protocol? Obviously, everyone has their art and they can do it their own way. But let's hear it from you. What do you recommend in terms of scans, core scores, et cetera?
Well, I mean, the chiro math is always a little interesting one to work with. But the one thing that, people always say, why do you choose the number 12? Or why is it sort of in there? And I said, well, it's pretty simple. It's divisible by 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12 itself. Right. So it's very easy to build multiples. But I like 12 because of that, but also because it gives you some spacing. And the reality is that when you take a look at really, my PVA when I left practice was, and I know this is something that you guys do, was just somewhere over 300. Wow. And so, I mean, you're working with people that have been with you for a very long time, I mean, way more than 300 visits, but the realities were is that we stuck to the 12. And when we stuck to the 12, and this was very interesting, when we stuck to the 12, there were some people that were like, do I have to have another scan? And the answer was yes. Is because there's a lot of changes that you aren't aware of and that we're building this healthy rhythm within your nervous system. And so we stuck to the 12 and this is where we got it, is even when they got down to every 2 weeks. And so they were every 2 weeks, which means that 12 visits would have been, let's say, 6 months. We said you need a minimum of 3 examinations yearly. So we would put it every 8 visits, that if they were in every couple of weeks. And the reason behind it was really based upon the science of HRV. Because in the science of HRV, even though it's a lagging indicator, the realities are is that we live out of our adaptive reserve. And it's very, very well noted that well-adjusted people stay in the upper echelons and stay locked into what we call the green zone, but they really don't migrate. You get to a point when you're old enough and otherwise that you don't get a lot better, but you stay in the green zone. And the green zone, for those that don't know what I'm talking about, is a very highly adaptive zone. The trouble is that if they drift away, and it happens pretty quickly if they end up in a stressful relationship or a stressful time, like stuff happens, they're going to plummet. And you can be their eyes in the unseen. You can be there. So I really got into the rhythm of, really getting people excited about it. And, I know that the reason people don't do it is time. I was seriously, I was doing 28 an hour. I was adjusting 28 an hour, which was sort of my rhythm for decades. And when I was doing that, it made so much sense. I had 2 full-time scanning systems and I had 2 full-time scanners that were going. And we would be doing, there were certain days we'd be doing 30 scans a day, in our office. And I never gave one away. Like they weren't included in the care plans. They were built into it. So they became a really high revenue stream. I mean, they were really valuable. And I think that the more you value, look, if you go and get an MRI, they're not throwing it in because you're a nice guy. That's part of what the rationale is. So when you start to take yourself seriously and you start to look at, this idea that, man, the power that you have in your hands to create adjustive care is really something that needs to be acknowledged. I got to share this one thing that reminded me. I met a guy who was BJ's patient in my early years in practice, and he was from a city just outside of Toronto, which is called Kitchener. And he went down, I think it was 1951 or 52, and he went down to the Palmer Clinic and had BJ care for him. And so I was talking to him and I said, tell me what he told you about his care plan. And he was a slip and check guy. BJ had his slip and check model, which is, you'd go in there and you'd have, I think it was anywhere from 6 to 12 sessions to make sure that you were well cared for. Your settings were there. And then you could go back and check on it yearly or whenever it was needed for a slip and check. And so this was later on. And I said to him, how much did he charge you, in that time, in that era, in 1951 for it? And he said, yeah, my fee was somewhere around $1,600 to be cleared. Okay. And he said, but let me put that in perspective for you. That was a 3-bedroom home in my town when I got checked and cared for. So that was the kind of certainty that BJ had when he was putting it on the line for when you were doing it. And here's the other part of the story of that sort of histrionics that was going on. Do you know how BJ, you wonder why he lived in such beautiful places, is do you know how he booked in the Palmer Clinic? 16 on the 15. He was doing 64 adjustments an hour.
By the way, I changed after you and I talked Mercedes scheduling.
Oh yeah,
opened up my entire capacity.
I know, it's
right.
remarkable.
Instead of the 15-minute, we changed it to the 20. Doubled the amount of people on the 20. We were
I know,
flying.
it's so great. Anyhow, there's stories on stories on stories, but here's the bottom line.
Isn't it nice to know that at least somebody listens to you?
Yeah, I love to hear that. Are you kidding? One of the things that people forget is that, and this is that person standing in front of the mirror again, that you made an amazing choice because you can't get any better life than what we have. But the second thing is that as much as we may not understand all the science behind it, and I think that's one of the things that makes it an art form as much as anything else, we do know it works. And one of the greatest things that's happened is that in the research world, we're now leaning on artificial intelligence, AI scaling to try and understand more about what happens. And so this is the other part of CLA that people aren't very much aware of, is that we collect data now in the cloud. And so that when people are assessing to the subluxation and adjusting to the subluxation, that we've got data that's there. And Brett and Rick, you probably, having grown up with us as you have, we now collect somewhere just over 2 million scans, and I'm talking core score scans annually. And so when we can share that, we're in several research projects with Heidi Havik and the New Zealand team, and we're doing some really cool what are called PBRNs, which is practice-based research networks, which means that we collect big tranches of data, and as a result of that, when we throw them in front of machine learning, we don't have to ask the question. This is the coolest thing. We don't have to ask the question, does chiropractic affect colic? We don't ask the question. What we say is, what's changing? Show us where the nidus of change is happening in this, because along with some of the data that we're collecting in their thing, we're collecting symptom profiles and personality profiles, and we're talking about this. So we throw all of this in a recipe of a soup, and it starts to churn. And because of the big data, we have this ability to really shift so much more as to what we don't ask the questions, we just say, oh yeah, that's a good question we should think about. And eventually you can start bringing it into this world. And, CLA transformed from being sort of this parochial, examination world, which is great. We're a big data company now. We're one of the we certainly are the leading chiropractic big data companies, but we hold such huge tranches of valuable data that what happens is that we're starting to be, wooed by people outside of chiropractic to come into us and say, hey, could you look at what it's like with this stress response in human beings to see where the outcomes could come from? And so, we're really at an exciting transference of timing. CLA has always been a great idea. That's one of the reasons that I was attracted to it. And it's one of the reasons I jumped at the opportunity to own it and run it. But it's always been based upon this innovative, great idea, which says, look for the unknown and look for the unseen. And when you look for the unknown and look for the unseen, there's a friggin' magical mushroom somewhere in there that you get a chance to kick around. And it's really quite something to hang out with chiropractors, to hang out with really bright people on the outside and inside of chiropractic. And I think that and it's a shame that I'm 20 years older than I was when we played that game we were in. I kind of wish that I could, be kind of like Gandalf and be here forever. But, I think in our lifetime, we're going to see that this evidence-informed relationship has something that we can lean on. That's my hope anyways.
So as we come to a close, my question is what is the best way if someone is not familiar with CLA or wants to learn more about CLA, instrumentation, a white paper, heart rate variability? Is there a resource
Yeah, absolutely. You also learned that in the world of social media, you better be quick with your message because it comes and goes pretty quickly. So we have insightcla.com. So Insight is the technology, insightcla.com. And if they just put a slash and put Insight Scanning, or they just get into the insightcla.com and go to Insight Scanning, we've created a really great page that allows them to understand the specs, that understands where it's at. And there's something called a practice survey assessment, which is really a nice way to just sort of say, tell us a little bit about what makes your practice tick. And you learn pretty quickly about what it is. Do you see kids? Do you work with this? And we actually ask them, which coaching program you're in. So be sure to flag, Chiro Destiny. And one of the things that we do with that is that we run it through a bit of a grinder, and we get a chance to sort of see what the rhythms are in terms of the best practice models that we can have. I think that if people get a chance to realize that today's world is based upon technology decision making, they're going to be very comfortable coming to CLA, because that's our innovation model. And honestly, if you can, I'd love to. Why don't I share with you guys so that you can get it? If somebody wants to get I have an ebook that I wrote, which is on the application of HRV in a clinical practice, in a chiropractic practice. So I wrote an ebook that's very easy to read. It's not heavy at all. It's simple. All they have to do is send me a quick email at just do it at info@insightcla.com and just put HRV. Okay. And you guys can send that out to them. And
we'll have Kimberly send that out to everybody.
Yeah, and we'll get much more connected with Chiro Destiny, so you guys have the confidence and whatever else to have that next sense of feeling, that not only are they looking at technology, but that they have the confidence to know how to use it and how to communicate it and everything else.
Right, so, and you're the first one to say, look, it doesn't matter what equipment you have. No. If you're not the person behind it. You could have the greatest sports car in the world, but if you don't know how to drive it, it's just going to sit in the garage. So you've always been a believer in us. And obviously vice versa, but the combination of helping the chiropractor become the best version of him or herself as a leader, as a communicator, as a decision maker, as a healer, then having the proper equipment to pull it off.
Yep.
And again, we've always recommended and have said from stage many, many times, there's no way we're practicing without the subluxation station and the technology. And we're also not ever going to slow down or stop working on ourselves to be able to deliver the goods and have an amazing life as a chiropractor. There's something about, it seems to be what happened is the frustrations of practice have taken over. And as frustration built, they almost pulled back to the smallest versions of themselves. But when you gain certainty through understanding, through science, through research, through technology, where the communication now, the conversation between you and the patient is almost done for you, all you have to do is not screw it up. Chiropractic does sort of sell itself. It always has.
Yeah, and I will just add that it's that abundance mindset. There's a lot of noise, and there's a reality too. Look, I know there's more month than there is money in a lot of people's moment right now, but that's the reality today, not of their future. I mean, I always remember Nathaniel Brandon up at Total Solution, and he had this very simple, model in which he said, okay, everybody look over your left shoulder, and everybody in the room looks over the left shoulder. And he said, do you see the cavalry coming? And he said, listen, grow up. I mean, he was the father, he created the term self-esteem. Right. But, he said, it's self-responsibility and self-esteem. At some point, you have to call the question, which we all do in corporate, right? Like, call the question. You have to call the question, are you in the game or are you out of the game? Because if you're out of the game, get the hell out of the game for your sake. Like, don't dabble in chiropractic. And I mean that with the greatest respect. And it's not about whether you should or you shouldn't. It's hard to dabble in chiropractic. It's hard to meet the needs of the patient ahead of the philosophy and the driving that's there. You can be an incredibly, which we all are, we're incredibly skilled and friendly people, but you don't have to be something you're not meant to be. You don't have to be a medical doctor that's underserviced. You don't have the technologies to look at pathology, but you have the technologies to look at performance, to look at stress, and to look for the vertebral subluxation. I can give you those. And the truth of it is that when you don't see the cavalry coming and you kind of run out of options and you realize you're on your own, join Chiro Destiny, because let me tell you, it's this mentorship, this modeling, this kick your ass around the block so that they're not, I mean, you guys are going to be really nice to people until they try and con you.
Until we're not.
Yeah. And
so the bottom line is like what we have to do for chiropractors, one, and you do the same thing, meet them where they are. We have to find out where their fears are, where their stuck points are, where their lack of certainty is. Is there a passion? Is there a love for chiropractic? And that seems to be the theme with all of our leaders and speakers that we've had on so far. It's all about, you have to become certain in what you're doing and who you are. And so we help with them on the headspace stuff to break through their fears, break through their limiting beliefs. And then we bring the right people to them, the right resources, like a CLA, like the subluxation station and everything that, and the technology. And we bring the worlds together. So you have the certainty, you have the philosophy, you have the headspace, you have the passion, the love, the do what it takes attitude. And then we bring the science with that, right? So it gives them the certainty that they need to move forward. And then all you have to be able to do is understand who the person is in front of you so you can effectively communicate this love and passion and this thing called chiropractic. And if you can do that effectively, these are the chiropractors that are breaking records, breaking through their stuck points, getting to that next level, getting to their dream practice. And it takes some guts and audacity, but you got to ask for help.
Inside of Pandemicville, you have docs breaking records all over town.
Absolutely. And I can tell you they're not doing that because they're running a PI practice alone. You know what I'm saying is because they're meeting the people where they're at. And they're not afraid of telling the story about, immune activity. You don't have to hold yourself out and do something that's indefensible that says, I absolutely, improve your immune. No, I activate or engage your immune responsiveness. I can stand behind that till the cows come home. It's a reality that happens when you change in the neural function, immunity, follows suit.
The narrative has changed and it's an opportunity time, and hopefully docs are continuing to look back. And I know that you've had some clients that were sort of inactive. They
absolutely.
They look over here. Hey, look, there's a shiny squirrel over there. And hopefully this sort of links them back to going back to whatever their basic was, which was utilize the technology you already have sitting in your office better and create a consistent system around it. When we talk about the 7 C's of chiropractic, consistent systems is a huge part of the success of chiropractic. You can't say, I'll scan this one and not that. You either do it or you don't. It's either part of your science of your analysis or it isn't, right? To do the haphazard gets you nowhere. So hopefully they're reinvigorated to learn more about what CLA has been doing lately and, upgrade, do whatever they have to do to get their team trained. Docs don't ever have to touch the machine if they ever don't want to. Hire someone else to do it. And let's turn it on. Keep talking the story of nerve interference, and let's just get chiropractic where it's supposed to be. We know we have to do it grassroots, one patient at a time, and it's going to take both of our groups to continue to get louder and louder until chiropractors listen.
Yeah, and I think if you can sort of look at that crisis and opportunity at the same time with the pandemic noise that's out there, everybody's familiar with doing online learning now. And so we changed a tremendous amount from our live programs. We used to do what was called an insight solution. We put people in the room. Obviously, you guys were at them, and it was sort of part engagement with them and part learning. And man, we're getting better and better. Luckily, we had a running start at it, but we really found a way to engage and teach using the Zoom models. And one of the things that's really easy, and you save a lot of money, is that and I miss being in a room with chiropractors. Like, I'll be absolutely honest with you, I miss that a lot. But I will say that you get a good feel for the rhythms when you get good at this thing that we're doing tonight. And I as I said, I miss it, but I also know that it's easier sometimes to get your staff engaged when they don't have to travel or leave their home or do whatever. It opens opportunities. So, I think we all try and capitalize on that.
And you said it. I think if you look for the opportunity, you'll find it without
Absolutely, Brett.
Right? So listen, in closing, Dave, is in the interest of time, we consider you one of the true legends in chiropractic. You are awesome. I thought tonight was epic. I think the work that you're doing is just unbelievable. And you're one of the few people that are going to help propel this profession forward to the levels that it's capable of, certainly. So we can't thank you enough for spending the tonight with us. We know we use your technology. We encourage anybody out there, if you're not currently, check it out. Go to his website. We've listed it here. Do your homework, do your research. And I think that you'll find some really, really exciting things going on. I know I'm going to be buying a second station for sure. I'm looking forward to that. But on behalf of myself and Rick and Kimberly and Debbie and Larry and our team and members of Chiro Destiny and the chiropractic profession, we just really want to thank you so much for spending time with us here tonight, giving us your wisdom, giving us all this wonderful information. You are a rock star amongst rock stars. And we know the future for chiropractic is absolutely bright, no matter what they keep throwing at us, a pandemic and whatever else is coming down. It doesn't matter.
They let you out of Canada.
I can't get out, but all right, guys. So group hug. I love you. I love you like brothers. And thank you again. As always,
You're awesome.
You, buddy.
It's the best of the best.
Great night, y'all.
Love you all.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Peace.